Hello and welcome to the Book Closet. In today's video, I'm going to be doing a review over 3 different books that are part of what I think is an underrated book series called A Sinclair Mystery, and it's written by a very small artist named Jane Hurst. And I just wanted to say thank you to her son, Tom, known as Geowizard on YouTube, for mentioning that his mom had just finished the 3rd book in her series in 2024. I'm extremely happy that I decided to pick the series up, and I hope that after this video you decide to add this to your reading list for 2025. So for this video, I'm going to start by doing an overall review of all 3 of the books, jumping into the characters, the setting, the plot, and the ending of each of the books. And then after that, I will tell you if I recommend the series to you or not. After all that, I'm going to jump into the spoiler discussions. So if you have already read the books and you just want to skip straight to the spoilers, just go to this time right here. So as I mentioned, the series is called A Sinclair Mystery. So jumping right into the first book, the first book is called When Skies Are Gray, and again, it's written by Jane Hurst. So the characters in the first book are extremely well detailed, and I think Jane did a great job at developing these characters, and not only the main characters, but also the side characters, which is very different for books because I feel like in most books, you get a very good description of the main characters, and then sometimes like a side character just comes in and you don't really get anything from them. Like, you don't have any feelings toward them, they're just kind of a name that just appeared in the pages. But I think with Jane, she definitely detailed all of the characters, so you feel something toward each character throughout the book. I will say some of the characters are very quirky and very different, but this makes the story even better. I will say some of the characters actually caught me off guard with their different behaviors throughout the story, which sometimes became humorous, and I just thought that made the book even more enjoyable. My only complaint about this book, and actually throughout the books, it gets a little better towards books 2 and 3, but the characters' names are spelled differently. Sometimes it's spelled differently on each page, so I don't know what happened there, but I thought that was a little odd. Obviously it doesn't change anything for the book, but it was just something that I noticed, and that would be my only complaint, really. Jumping into the setting of this book specifically, she gets a little more into detail, obviously, in the first book, but the setting is pretty much the same for the other 2 books as well. But it is set in England, and it's set in a relatively remote Oxfordshire village named Kington. She describes this village very well. You definitely get a feel for what the atmosphere is like, and it's one of those little villages where everybody knows everybody. I think my favorite part of her setting up the whole setting, especially for book 1, mostly for book 1, but it kind of carries throughout the other books as well, just the feeling of Miri's cottage, which Miri is the main character of the story for the most part, but she had a vision for a little cottage that she wanted in this tiny village, and she really explains it in a way that makes it come to life. So you really get what the aesthetic she's going for is, and it's one of those houses that just feels warm and cozy even just by reading the words on a page, and it's definitely one of those houses you want to go hang out with all your friends at and just relax. As we get into the plot of book 1, I will say it's a little slow at first because she is getting into detail about characters in her cottage and the village and just really setting it all up, which is extremely helpful just to get the feeling for books 2 and 3 as well. So it's definitely worth taking the time to read that, and the book does get better. The plot thickens very quickly, and of course, it's already set in a small village, so you know that something's going to happen. And of course, it's a psychological thriller, so we already know something's going to happen. The difference is that this book is written very differently. It doesn't feel like a book that I've read before, even though I thought for sure I could figure out what was going on. It definitely felt different. I did not guess what was happening. And I would say the characters' interests are what keep the middle part of the book going for sure, because without their interests, I just don't know how the story keeps progressing. And you also never know if their interests are going to get them into trouble or if it's going to help them out in the end. And speaking of the ending, you also never know what's going to happen. So the ending is definitely not predictable, and toward the end of this book I also started to wonder, do they find who they're looking for or what's going on by the end of book 1, or does it kind of keep going throughout books 2 and 3? So I thought that was really interesting to see. I'm not going to give away any hints about that, but I do think the character relationships are what really made the ending just feel better. It was much more wholesome. The way that certain characters interacted with each other made the ending feel even better. There's not a whole lot to say about the ending without giving any details away, but I will say that it's definitely just not predictable. It's definitely worth moving on to book 2. I will say why the ending was not predictable. The ending to book 1 was definitely not as thrilling as the ones in book 2 and 3. So I hope that once you finish book 1, you really look into the other books, and I hope that you're excited to continue to read those as well. So without further ado, we're going to move into book 2, which is called Something Wicked. And again, written by Jane Hurst. So with Something Wicked, this book was honestly even better. Getting into the characters of this book, I love seeing how the previous characters from book 1 started to develop further. And you also get to see if the characters from book 1 change or if they're just like stuck in their ways, and it's very interesting to see the development there. Also, the new characters, they're of course extremely well detailed, and I love that she added an extra diversity of characters. So like I said, there's already the quirky characters in book 1, and then you get to book 2 and you just get a whole new set of people that are very different. I think especially in book 2, the characters are projected a certain way and you kind of don't really know what to think. You don't want to fall into the trap of the normal character development, but you also know she might throw a twist on it, so it's definitely interesting to see how the new characters progress throughout the stories and learning the truth about each of them. And getting into the setting of this book as well, so of course it's set in the same village, Kington, from book 1, and this time I will say the feeling of the village just seems kind of dark and gray. So if that tells you anything about how the story's gonna go. So getting into the plot, the way book 2 starts, I'm instantly intrigued and I just couldn't wait to keep reading. But one thing that started to scare me towards the middle of the book, I started to get really nervous that the book was going to take a turn that I didn't really like. It's definitely not my style. I don't want to give too much away on this one, but if you do read book 2, I will say that there's a trap that you think you're going to fall into, and I think you'll be surprised at how it really ends. So I was very happy whenever the plot took a different turn and not the ones that I thought it was going to take, making this book even more exciting. Even though I thought the book was going to take a turn I didn't like, I will say it still kept me very intrigued and questioning everything. So it did not get boring just because I thought it was taking a certain turn, and I hope that encourages you to keep reading even if you do hit that point where you think you know what's going on. So getting into the ending of book 2, I would definitely say this took the biggest turn that I couldn't have seen this coming at all. So there's no way to predict how this could have went at all, I don't think. If you did, I would be very surprised. But I think with book 2, especially the emotions and the background that all the characters had was pretty crazy, and like the roots really do run deep in this one. So it's gonna blow your mind. I hope you enjoy the ending of book 2 as much as I did. Alright, so getting into book number 3, the last book that she just finished in 2024 is called Cold Cold Heart. So the characters in this one, I really enjoyed seeing how the previous characters all developed again. They never stopped developing. I do think some of them are definitely stuck in their ways and will never change, but it was nice to see a few of them, especially the ones on the police force, change a little bit different and just become overall well-rounded people. With the character development in this one, it definitely makes them more personable, and I think it helps the reader become even more attached to all the characters, which is definitely something that is great to have in book 3. So as always, the new characters, a lot of detail, and you instantly have different feelings towards these characters, and you kind of know right away which ones to be weary of, but you think you know them and you don't, and it's kind of the same thing with book 2 as well. You think you know a character and then you're completely thrown off. So it's very exciting to see how the new characters come into play as well. So the setting for book 3, of course, is still in the village of Kington. It's mostly set outside. In book 3, everything feels just cold and gray, so you really get a feeling of winter in this book for sure. It definitely made Miri's cottage stick out more as the house that you want to go to when you're cold, so you can get nice and warm and sit with them and eat some good food. So the feeling that I get from book 3. But getting into the plot of this book starts very quickly. So from the fast start, you can't wait to get to the end. So it's a very quick read if you're really into it. I fell into several different tropes throughout the entire book, and I never know who to believe. The entire plot of this story is definitely very interesting, and you could never see the way it's going either. And I feel like a broken record saying this about all her books, but I definitely couldn't have guessed anything throughout the entire time. The whole plot felt like a build up to something that I wasn't going to be able to guess. And once we get into the ending, I started to not trust anybody. Um, Definitely, even characters that were there from book one, I started to question and think, man, maybe they're in on it. So I will say, especially with the ending of this book, I definitely felt more emotional towards certain characters that have been around for the whole time. And I love that the ending of this book showed how much you started to care about the characters throughout the entire series. But again, the roots run deep on the ending of book 3 because you cannot guess this. I hope you will enjoy the ending of this book as much as I did. But with that, that's the end of the series, and I hope that after this review you decide to add this to your list of reads for 2025. And with that, I want to say that I highly recommend this series, especially for a small author tackling a whole series like this. I think she did a great job, and I was very excited for every book throughout this entire series. But with that, if you haven't read the books, now's your time to head to Amazon and hopefully go buy this series. But now we're going to get into the spoiler discussions for each of the 3 books. Now I'm going to get into the spoiler discussion for book 1, which is When Skies Are Gray. To be honest, I don't have a lot to talk about with book 1. I didn't see any issues with it to where I'd have any complaints about it or anything that... It definitely surprised me. Well, I will say how the story went down, it was surprising, but not quite as surprising as book 2 and 3. But one thing I did want to say is that I love that the author added in Adam, the mentally challenged person that ended up helping throughout the entire story. It was definitely nice to see that she added a mentally challenged person as not only a character, but kind of a main character in the first book, which I thought was really cool because in any of the books that I've read, I've honestly never seen that done, so I thought that was pretty cool. It definitely showed how much patience and understanding that you have to have with them, and it just helped that Miri did have the psychiatrist background, so it was very interesting to see how she made that work throughout the story with Adam, and it definitely shows how tough of a job that can be, and also that not everybody understands how to use the job, and I think she really pulled that together in the end, and it definitely made the story a lot more interesting, but also just felt more connected as well. And I also love that throughout all of her books, the cover of the book actually was a little bit of a secret to kind of what was going to happen in the book, so I thought that was kind of cool. But I hope you enjoyed book 1 as much as I did and couldn't wait to move on to book 2. So with that, we're going to get on into book 2 called Something Wicked. So for spoiler discussions on this one, I'm just curious to know if anyone else got nervous that this was going to take like some sort of witchcraft turn into like magic and spells or something, because that's what I got nervous about, and I was very scared because that's not my thing. I don't really want to read about it, so I did get very nervous then. I'm curious if anybody else kind of thought it was headed in that direction too. I do think the twist on the end of this book was probably one of the most crazy twists I've had in this series. So I think it's crazy that someone so little at the time her sister was killed was able to remember the man that did it after all those years. Just a quick glimpse on the street at this man, and she knew that that was the guy that, you know, ran her sister over. And I just thought that was absolutely insane, and I definitely wouldn't have guessed that. Like I said before, that the roots just run deep with this one. I'm definitely interested to hear what the opinions are on book 2 because of how I kind of thought it was going. So just let me know down in the comments what you thought, and if you got a little bit nervous in the middle there too. And we're going to move on into the spoiler discussions for book number 3. So for book number 3, Cold Cold Heart, I'll be honest, I thought so many people were guilty. At first I thought Cassie was guilty, but I was like, no, that feels too obvious. I can't think that right now. And then they kept playing it up, and I'm like, it has to be her. At least she has to be involved in it in some way. But then I got to thinking, whenever they went to interview Lawrence and his kids are around and stuff, I thought, it's definitely him. Like, there's something off. He was almost too cooperative to where I was like, man, he must have like the perfect story for his alibi or what was going on. But at the same time, Lawrence also felt too obvious because of course we would all think it's the husband. But then as soon as Lawrence's editor entered the picture, Amber, as soon as she got in there, I was like, they're definitely working on it together. Like, he's having an affair and they wanted her gone, and this was their only plan that they had. And I was like, So it has to be them. And then, even before Edie got hurt, I thought for sure maybe it was her. But I thought, even from book one, I was like, there's something suspicious about Edie, and she's definitely going to be a traitor to Miri at some point, right? So the whole time throughout all the books, I thought maybe it was going to be her. Even though I developed a little bit of a connection with her, I thought she was really sweet, and I was like, this little old lady's going to crush my heart when she turns out to be evil. And then I felt really bad when she got hurt, and I was like, okay, so it's not her. To be honest, I never thought it would have been the two choir girls that she knew from when she was young and all the stuff that she put them through. So I thought it was really crazy that, even with this one, in book 3, the roots still run deep, and somehow it all ties back into when these characters were kids, and I thought that threw a really big twist in the story as well, and I just absolutely loved the ending to this book, and I hope that you did too, and I hope that you enjoyed the whole series. And with that, please recommend this series to other people. I do think it is worth the read and definitely an underrated psychological thriller, and I hope that you enjoyed it just as much as I did, and I hope to see you in the next book.